Hi everyone, my name is T and I'm on the Vancouver Startup Week team. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land regardless of where you are joining us from. I'm grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I'm privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us for VSW 2021 and welcome to Startups Going Global with International Expansion, Targeting New Customers, hosted by SFU VentureLabs. This session is also part of the VSW Growth Track and is proudly supported by Innovate BC. Innovate BC is a Crown agency that provides small business around the province with funding, business coaching, and educational content, and they're helping entrepreneurs and founders start and scale their business and adapt to the changes brought on by COVID-19. So if you're looking for support for your business, make sure you stop by their booth to learn more about how they can help you. I would also like to thank SFU VentureLabs for being an event partner and also a sponsor. VSW could not happen without the continued support from our community sponsors. And if you have any questions for our speakers, please post them in the Whova Q&A session. And you can also upload questions from other attendees, but I'll now pass the mic over to VentureLabs team and we'll begin.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ryan Cross and I'm glad to welcome you all to this panel this morning. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, so we've got today's panel is on startups going global with international expansion and targeting new customers through that. Now, VentureLabs is, of course, an accelerator in Vancouver, and one of the things that we provide is programs and services to help early stage startups and growth stage startups grow. We provide mentors and programming, but one of the things that we don't have that much exposure into, and one of the reasons why we wanted to hold this event today, was around assisting companies in going global. And that's what we're here today to listen to, and that's primarily with the support of the Trade Commission services. So we'll work through a discussion of 4 startups that have gone international. It'll be This Fish, Genexis, Bioconscious, and Jelly. And they're from 3 very separate industries. And we'll get them to each describe how they've been supported by the Government of Canada through the Trade Commission services. As our host already said, the questions will come through the event app. And then we want to also make sure that you have contact information for everybody who's on here. And we'll be circulating the email addresses of the event attendees after the event. And so with that, I would like to move into our first speaker. It's my privilege today to introduce Ramneet Sran from Global Affairs Canada. She works as a foreign services officer and has held assignments abroad in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and in Boston, with a focus on innovation. She recently joined the Pacific Regional Office of Global Affairs in Vancouver and is now working with us here in supporting growth stage companies that are looking to expand internationally to raise capital and grow. Ramneet, please.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Ryan. It is a real pleasure to be here with SFU and our great Vancouver Pacific region companies. I'll kick it off maybe by speaking a little bit more about the Trade Commissioner Service and who we are, and then I'll add some additional information on some of our programs throughout the presentation and come back with a bit of a wrap up on how you can get in touch with us. So the Trade Commissioner Service falls under the Federal Government Department Global Affairs Canada. We have a rather large footprint around the world. We have 160 offices with over 1,000 trade commissioners that work in these offices to support Canadian companies. We are the largest network of Canadian trade professionals around the world. And today we're joined by 2 of our trade commissioners based in the US, who you'll be meeting a little later on. Our mandate is to help Canadian companies export abroad. And we help them by helping them navigate through export challenges, building their confidence before they enter new markets, helping them with programs that support diversification. And often people think that most of our customers most of our clients are large conglomerates, but in fact, the majority of companies that we work with are SMEs. In terms of our client definition, I thought I would just highlight what we look for when we are working with clients. The first piece is a meaningful economic tie to Canada. In addition to that, we're looking for capacity and a commitment to internationalization, and also good potential to add value to the Canadian economy. So later in this presentation, we'll share information on how you can work with us, but it's generally a good idea to have a business plan available. Let us know what is unique about your product or your service, which country or region you're targeting, and how and when you plan to enter that market. In particular, today we'll talk about 3 of our unique programs that are popular with growth stage companies. One of them is called the Canadian Technology Accelerator. The other is a few initiatives that we are undertaking in the venture capital business line. And lastly, the Can Export Funding Program. So I'll pass it back to you, Ryan, and I'm happy to share more information on all of these programs with my colleagues throughout the presentation.
Yeah, to start things off, we wanted to go to Eric Inotam, and he's the co-founder of a company called This Fish, which was or is now a VentureLabs alumni. Eric has a pretty interesting background. He grew up in a commercial fishing family, worked as a fish buyer, deckhand, and then ultimately a vessel captain. He's also won multiple awards for writing, and is also a foreign correspondent in Scandinavia for a design magazine, and then worked for EcoTrust Canada. Now he runs one of the most innovative companies in the global commercial fishing industry. So Eric, to kick things off, can you give us a bit of a sense of what This Fish is about? And then also specifically, I know Ramneet and I wanted to find out a little bit more about the EcoTrust involvement in the company.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so we're a software company, obviously based here in Vancouver, and we're basically providing software and artificial intelligence to the seafood manufacturing sector to allow them to digitize all their production, quality control, and traceability data in real time on the factory floor using IoT devices and tablet computers. The seafood industry is a pretty unique vertical. It's mostly an analog industry. And so we've kind of developed technology really kind of specific for this manufacturing niche. And seafood is the most globally traded protein on Earth. About 75% of all seafood faces global competition, which is significantly more than most of the other protein sectors. Also very complex. The FAO has about 12,000 species, on a species list. So it's a very complex, very global industry, and we're building kind of niche solutions for the industry. So from the very beginning, we were obviously global, given the global nature of the industry. And we actually, one of the other co-founder of the company is actually EcoTrust Canada, a nonprofit based here in Vancouver that was trying to build traceability solutions for the seafood sector to help them, improve kind of consumer trust in seafood products, eliminate, illegal fish getting into the marketplace and that sort of thing. And in late 2017, we recognized that we built something that had commercial value, and we decided to spin it out into a for-profit company. So EcoTrust remains one of the largest shareholders in our company. We're a bit unique that way. I don't think there's that many, tech companies that have an environmental group as their largest shareholder.
So you said it's, obviously a global industry, which maps quite nicely to how Ramneet was saying there's like 160 global offices for the Trade Commission. Overall, what's the experience like working with the Trade Commission?
Yeah, I mean, the Trade Commission, I would say, if you're not familiar, a lot of us might be familiar with, government services. For instance, I've been trying to call Revenue Canada for the past 6 months, and I've never been able to talk to anybody like live. You know, if you had to do contact tracing, you might be able to get a public servant. So, you know, people have a certain expectation about like the public service. And you know, I lived in Ottawa. My partner is a public servant with the federal government. And I would say that the Trade Commission service is on par with like private sector service delivery. I found it extremely professional, very timely. And yeah, I've had, you know, just generally a really good, you know, really good experience. Although I think that I've been given some tips from some trade commissioners over the years to ensure that I actually have good experiences with the service. So
what are some of those?
yeah, so I mean, I think it must have been around 2017, 18. One of the trade commissioners in Vancouver here, who's I think moved on to another position, David Marshall, basically said the Trade Commission has a very good CRM, and they do monitor companies that engage with them. And he basically recommended that, you know, start engagement with the trade commissioners, build up a reputation, and you'll build up a file in their CRM so that when I just randomly pick up the phone or send an email to the consulate in Bogota, they're going to see me come in, probably go onto their CRM, see that I'm a credible company, that I do business, and I've had a lot of relations with the Trade Commission service, and I'm much likelier to get a response from the Trade Commission. So, you know, from the very beginning, I started to engage them. And so as a result, I do get very responsive service because they see that I'm a serious, credible player. Because there are, you know, as Ramit said, there are a lot of SMEs that are approaching the Trade Commission service. My general impression is that they're very busy and they have a lot of demands on them. So, you know, I've been able to, I think, kind of float to the top, higher in their CRM and kind of gain some points. I don't know if they officially have a point system, but you know, that's what I've kind of been told, that, you know, engage early, engage often, and try to use them as effectively as you can.
Sure. That sort of dovetails to the sort of a follow-up question. What's a non-obvious lesson that you would have learned working with the Trade Commission in terms of, you know, things not to do, or something that you're like, man, if I would have known that 6 months ago, that would have been easier? So anything that pops into mind there?
Well, I mean, my general impression is that they are busy. They're very transactional. They have a lot of, you know, inflowing traffic from businesses. They're, you know, making quick connections. So I would say be careful not to over ask. And, you know, they're not your business development representative. I would say they're more like your advisor and probably your connector. So, you know, they're not supposed to be actually doing, you know, your business development or sales for you. They're just supposed to be making connections for you and that sort of thing. The other thing that I found very odd is, you know, you can't take a cell phone or a tablet or a computer into a Trade Commission office abroad or an embassy. So that can be a difficulty with a tech company. They have beautiful offices, but I often had to meet, you know, in cafes and stuff, so I can do product demos and show people, you know, show trade commissioners our technology. So.
I want to jump to a really specific program that you used. You were in, I think, even now, I think, in the Canadian Technology Accelerator in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that experience like? We'll get into a little bit more about the programming for a Canadian Technology Accelerator when we go to Serban, but you know, how does that help in terms of advancing your business in Asia?
Yeah, so the three biggest markets for seafood in the world is the EU, the United States, and Japan. We haven't done any activity in Japan. We're mostly focused in Latin America and Southeast Asia at the moment. So interestingly, Accelerator for Japan is a bit of a sort of hyperbole, because as I learned from being an accelerator, nothing moves fast in Japan, and not business relations. So for instance, you know, in the very first opening session, I realized I need to get in Japan. This is going to be a long haul, and it's going to be a slow process. So this is not a sprint. This is, you know, this is not even a marathon. It's like Ironman. You have to, you know, run a marathon and swim the ocean and then cycle for another, you know, 50 kilometers. So it takes time to set up and build relations in Japan. So like that accelerator specifically, I mean, just understanding the business culture in Japan, I mean, that has been extremely beneficial. The accelerators actually made some connections with some large trading companies in Japan, and who've been helping me out and making some connections. So it's been pretty valuable. But you know, I don't see a payoff until late 2022. It's going to take, you know, 10 months, 12 months, 14 months to actually really land any business in Japan. And that's particular to Japan. I mean, things move a lot quicker in other Southeast Asian countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, that sort of thing.
That's really interesting. Thanks. I mean, obviously, I sort of know that there's a cultural differences between the two, but having that that support must be useful.
Also, you know, one other thing too is I mean, I've been to Japan a bit. You do get an impression that Japan's quite advanced in terms of technology and stuff, but actually, when it comes to digitization, that's not the case. And in a country with a graying workforce, there's a lot of conservative older people in business, my impression is. And so they're a bit of a laggard in terms of adoption of digital technologies, particularly in seafood. But my understanding is that's broadly across Japanese business. So like intelligence like that is just, you know, worth its weight in gold. And so that's the kind of thing that you'll get through the Accelerator program.
Excellent, thanks. I want to bring in Rob as well quickly here. So Eric, I know that you've raised or been looking to raise money through the Trade Commission service. How has that helped? And I want to bring Rob in as well because, and I'll introduce you, Rob, in just a second, because you help with that that venture capital side. So Eric, like you've worked, I think it was in DC and then down into Latin America and a little bit in Seattle, I think.
Yeah, so you know, I reached out to some of the trade commissioners, particularly in Seattle and in DC. They often have trade commissioners that are specifically assigned the role of helping make connection with VC funds. So you know, I made a few connections through Rob in Seattle and also through Alan, I think it's Alan Chong in Washington DC. Then Alan actually put me in contact with a VC in Mexico, and I've since then, actually even this morning, I had a call with the Canadian Trade Commission in Mexico with the person in charge of their VC and their tech innovation, and just getting a better sense of, you know, the market, the players. The one VC that I'm currently talking with in Mexico, I can validate with the Trade Commission service. They basically told me, yeah, it's a well-known VC. There are well-known business people who have invested in that VC. So, you know, it's a little bit of, I guess, due diligence they can help me with, like basic. I mean, obviously, it's not the responsibility of a trade commissioner to do due diligence, but that kind of local intel, again, is really valuable in just helping to make really just the initial connections and doing the vetting. And I should say, you know, Canada is a very well-respected, you know, country internationally. The diplomatic corps is often seen as quite prestigious. So, you know, trade commissioners could probably knock on doors and open doors a lot quicker than just a stranger foreigner, because they're officially from the Canadian embassy. So, you know, that can often be quite helpful, right? They can make connections a lot quicker than just, you know, just cold calling.
All right, excellent. As I said, we want to bring in Rob here, and Rob is it's Rob Fiddick. He's an ICT trade commissioner at the Consulate General of Canada in Seattle, where he assists Canadian technology companies expanding into the US Pacific Northwest, but then also helping drive foreign direct investment coming back into Canada. Rob is interesting because he's a native of Vancouver, but then lived in Seattle for 12 years and has also worked for the Washington State Department of Commerce. And though he's on mute, and I hope he's there, Rob, if you're there, what's it like? What's the background to your work? If you're able to jump back in. Maybe not. Uh, why don't I move on? Darian, I know you mentioned that you'd worked in Seattle a bit. I want to I'll introduce you in a second, but what's been your experience working down with the consulate in Seattle?
Yeah, they've all been great. Like every office I've had a very similar experience with, where they're quite friendly. You talk to a real person, they listen to what your needs are, and then they typically come back within a week. So it's looked as practically speaking as, hey, here's a list of contacts of brands you can work with. Here's a list of organizations that you should connect with. Here's some insights on, for our case, we're a services company, and we were looking to work with more professional services companies in United States. And she said, oh, hey, here's the ways that you could provide education and get CLE credits for those professional services organizations like law firms. So it was all quite positive, and they're all quite helpful. And to one point, even Boston organized an event, and they brought in a bunch of different speakers and provided a service to the area by saying, look at this great Canadian talent that we have, and check them out, and featured us at an event.
All right, cool. I'll come back to you when we chat about the Can Export grant. But thanks for that. You mentioned Boston, and of course, another way that Canadian companies are supported is through the Canadian Trade Technology Accelerator. And in Boston, Serban Georgescu manages the Boston Trade Accelerator there, Canadian Technology Accelerator, and he's a trade commissioner in Boston, focused on digital health. Serban is also a physician by training, a scientist and an entrepreneur, and has been involved in early stage medical technologies. As well, to help round out this portion of our session, we're also going to be joined by two CEOs who've participated in the program that Serban runs. Amir Harari is the CEO of Bioconscious Technologies, which is a health technology company focused on managing chronic conditions and improving health outcomes, as well as Carl Pringle, the CEO of the Vancouver-based Genexis Healthcare Systems. He runs it's a healthcare company, a healthcare technology company focused on digital automation tools for personalized, optimized, and safe prescribing options. Carl and I think Amir had this distinction of being in the last in-person cohort before COVID scattered us all around the world. So Serban, could you tell us a little bit about your program and what makes it unique and your approach to it? And then we'll bring in Carl and Amir to bounce back and forth with some questions.
Sure, Ryan, and thank you for the invitation. So first of all, there's now multiple CTAs, Canadian technology accelerators across the world. I mean, like we heard about Japan, and I know there's a few others in Asia, in Europe. The US, Boston, San Francisco, New York were some of the first. We've been here since 2013, so about 8 years now. Just a few stats, I think we've had over 130 companies go through our accelerator. They've raised over, I don't know, $80 million over that period. They've created almost $90 million in new revenue. And I know they've created at least 500 new jobs. That was last year's numbers, right? Every accelerator actually has its own business model, which depends on the local particularities and the strength of the local industry. In Boston, we have two major focuses, and one is life sciences, because this is a major interest here in Boston, and that includes biotech, medtech, diagnostics, and others. And then all sorts of technologies, starting with digital health, ICT, AI, fintech, edtech, sports tech, and others. I'm also happy to say that I think in the last 3 years, despite the distance, we've created a pretty strong connection between Vancouver and BC and Boston. So I think both Carl and Amir with their companies have opened the gate, and now consistently we have 2-3 companies out of the 10, 11, 12 coming from BCs. And recently, I mean, just now we have Axolotl Biosciences coming from Victoria. We have Advanced Intelligent Systems. Previously, we had Agents of Discovery, Sonic Insights, and a lot of other companies from there. So in general, companies come here looking for what companies are looking for, which is investors, to conquer the market, understand the local market, create connections with potential partners and customers. It's a pretty competitive process. I mean, consistently, we've had now 40, 50, even more companies competing for, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12 spots in that program. As I mentioned, we are multi-sectoral, which makes us different than other programs which focus so specifically on a certain sector. As always, companies are paired with some mentors who are most of them Canadian expats. Have lived here for a long time. Personally, I've lived in Boston now for 23 years, so it's good, and I still am learning and navigating different parts of the environment. So I think that's just in a few words about our program. And I will let Carl and Amir talk more about their own experience, good and bad.
Carl, why don't we start with you? I gave a sort of a half sentence worth of a description for what your company does and probably didn't do it justice. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and then what was the benefit of going to Boston? What was the experience like?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, Ryan, and to everyone else on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. Genexis, as Ryan alluded to, is a health tech company. We specialize in precision prescribing software that automates the inclusion of pharmacogenetics. And we do this because adverse drug reactions is a top 5 cause of death in virtually every major country around the world. Yet here we are in little old Vancouver with a digital automation tool that helps to solve this problem. And whilst we've been proven in the Canadian market over the course of the past 2 years, we really had our eyes set on a number of different markets around the world, with the US being a key one of those. And it's very easy for us to sit here, sort of 30, 40 miles from the border, and we think, oh yeah, I can see America, it's right there, and surely everything they do must be exactly the same as what we're used to and what we do here. But actually it's fundamentally different. So, and it's not only is it fundamentally different, it's also very difficult to navigate unless you have a guide, a Sherpa, to help you through that process. And we've been fortunate enough to, and have had people in the company with the wisdom to use the Consulate General services around the world in different ways and for different bits of information. And when the CTA program was recommended to us, we sort of embraced the idea of it and our application process wholeheartedly. And as Sherban alluded to, it's a pretty difficult program to get into. There's a lot of competition, and it's pretty tough actually to begin with. I thought it was quite painful. Sherban and his probing questions that are never ending. I thought, wow, is this just going to be 6 months of being questioned to death? But actually, we got into the program and we went in with 2 feet. We spent as much time in Boston as we could. And the reason why we chose the New England area CTA program rather than the one in the Bay Area is because we'd had 0 exposure to the East Coast. And we thought, you know what? If we don't go to the East Coast in this kind of format, it's going to be a long and arduous process. So that's fundamentally why we selected the East Coast program, and very much for the reasons that other people have mentioned, and those are really threefold. One is the investment community, and to give everyone an idea of the sense of size, the building where the CTA program companies can sit in and reside and make their home for the 6-month period, that building has more investment funds in it than all of British Columbia, just in that one in that one building. The second, of course, is access to customers and partners, and it very much depends on what a company's focal point is. If they want the East Coast or the Northeast Coast to be a key segment of their US expansion, then participating in the CTA in that area makes absolute sense. And then, of course, the third component for us was just the knowledge that was on the ground there that Serban had cultivated to be in as part of their program, which was about educating Canadian companies on the landscape of the healthcare system in the US, because it is in totality complex, and even in a regional or a state-by-state level, it is very complex. So those really were the three reasons, and it was immensely valuable to Genexis on all three of those criteria, actually.
Amir, same question for you. I mean, quickly describe what you do. I sort of butchered it on the way in, so you can rescue the company description, and then so same ideas as with Carl and Genexis, or what was your objective going in there?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone. I'm Amir. I'm the founder of Bioconscious Technologies. Real quick about the company. So we've been spending, the past 5 years developing an AI technology that predicts specific disease complications ahead of time and is able to either alert the patient or the physician that there's an impending complication that will help both the patient as well as their care provider to either reduce the impact or completely avoid those instances. To us, coming out of British Columbia, UBC, this was pretty exciting technology, but unfortunately the problem was, because we're based in Vancouver, nobody took us seriously, let's put it that way. And so it's really hard to make the case, compared to a company that basically comes to be based out of either Boston or Silicon Valley, no, you should go with the company that just came out of British Columbia. So it was basically a no-brainer that we had to use some form of support, government support, to actually make the case, and then go to these places such as Boston to actually prove our case, prove our point, and then say, like, yeah, we are absolutely what we say we are. We're way ahead of the curve. So we applied the first year. Serban had a bunch of questions for us. We talked on the phone several times. We got really interesting feedback. We got rejected first time around. So that's why I think everybody says, apply to the program and apply early. We got really good feedback, and we obviously executed on the feedback that we got. So that was pretty good. And the feedback was completely different. It was from somebody who was actually based in Boston, is involved with healthcare startups that come out of both Canada and the US. And then their feedback was kind of like, well, I looked at this, they're saying the same thing as you are. So what is truly different between you guys? So we really honed in on that, got into the program the second year. We actually went to Boston area, and then it's really hard to actually go there and make those connections if you don't know anyone. What I really liked about the program is that, we had these events where we would just sit down. They had, VCs, lawyers, and other people that we could basically trust, because they've been vetted by the consulate there. And then at the end of that trip, we realized that the way we're pitching the product is just actually not making anybody excited or interested. So we had to change the wrapper of the product, although the AI is still the same. We had to change the wrapper, focus on different areas of strength for us as compared to everybody else, and make the product slightly more attractive. Glad to say that we're still involved with the Trade Commission, despite the fact that we are an alumni. Serban has been extremely helpful to us, both on the professional as well as on the private side, if you will. He's gone above and beyond what his duties would actually require him to do. So we're super grateful for that. But what I would recommend, just coming out of this, is actually for everybody who's involved in a healthcare IT business or life sciences, it's really important to at least take advantage of these programs. Go to Boston area, see what others are doing and how they're actually pitching their product to a VC firm, because you'll learn a lot. It's a completely different way of thinking. The numbers are different. The value of the companies are assessed differently, US versus Canada. And real simple things, like for instance, we were talking to a group of investors in Canada, and we've had an argument in terms of a $16 million valuation. We're talking to a company based in Boston, and when we said 16, they actually said, sorry, 60 or 16, 16 or 60. And when we said 16, they really were being polite, but they wanted to burst into laughter. They're like, at this stage, like, why is your company so cheap? So it's a completely different mentality. It's a completely different environment. And if you are actually, in our case, we focus on chronic conditions. So there's a massive market south of the border. And if you're actually thinking of going to the US, you have to take advantage of these services. Otherwise, I don't think you'll have a really high chance of success, because there's more money, there's more know-how in the US. And if you're not very strategic about how you go about doing these things, these companies are just going to bury you in paperwork and then steal all your technology. So it's always best to work and take advantage of these sort of services, especially the Boston consulate services.
Carl, did you have a similar experience on the sort of culture, sort of fundraising side of things, or were you even raising there? I don't know.
Yeah, we weren't raising. So that wasn't one of our main objectives and goals. But I did have an interesting situation in the elevator where, and this is one of my tips for anyone who goes there and is able to do this physically, is just network with everyone wherever you can, because in that building where the CTA is housed, there's all sorts of very interesting and potentially very useful individuals. But in the elevator was a guy that ran one of the biggest health tech funds in Boston, and it was billions. And he continues to be a strong advocate of what we do to this day. But we weren't specifically raising.
Interesting. I had almost identical experience in Boston. Serban, I don't know if this is like a Boston thing, but people are friendly there. Not that they're not friendly anywhere else, but I ended up meeting somebody who was like one step removed from preventing the global financial crisis from sort of wiping out the global economy, who became a close advisor to us, and we met him at a networking event. It wasn't a trade commission networking event, unfortunately, but again, it seems as though there's a different sort of approach that people take there. Just to wrap it up on this sort of topic of healthcare and the New England area, Serban, is there anything that our two panelists haven't spoken to that you want to sort of double down on or bring up before we move on?
Yeah, so a couple of very quick points. So indeed, the healthcare system is very different here than in Canada. I mean, like, you think proximity, you think common language, you think very close cultures, but the systems are very different. So it takes a while for people to understand. Second, you mentioned the people being friendly. People are being friendly, but they also expect you to follow up, okay? And they also expect you to come with a clear ask and go for it. For the record, I think innovation is such a big focus in Boston that you look at every major hospital, you go and talk with a physician, they're literally bombarded with a lot of new ideas and technologies every single week. So you have to make your point. You have to say, why are you different? What are you bringing to that physician? And don't think that just if you win one physician, you're going to be there. I mean, you have to go and talk with financial, you talk with admin, you have to convince the C-level people in the hospital that you're bringing something useful. So it's a learning curve, but I think we're doing our part to help Canadian companies, become successful here.
Excellent. Carl, Amir, any other sort of wrap-up points in terms of your experience? In general, if there's one sort of last takeaway.
Yeah, probably just a couple of detailed things that people who want to go into the program or get into the program should take heed of. One of those is be super clear on the goals and objectives that you want to achieve when you go there, and have some stretch goals. But the crucial point is make sure the CTA is bought into those goals and objectives, and that they can help you, because that makes a real difference. The second is a key component of the program is you get assigned mentors, and and make sure that the mentors are a good match for what you need, both in terms of skill set and knowledge set. So spend some time. Don't just take it carte blanche that the mentors you've been given are the right ones. You know, do a little bit of exploration there. And then it's all about networking and making the most of the people that are in that ecosystem that you've been thrust into. And you know, for example, UMass Memorial, which I've been to a number of times now, and the first time was part of this program. It's a health system. You know, you have the choice. You can make your own way there by driving yourself or going in the CTA's luxury consular van driven by the chauffeur Serban. Now, going in the car by yourself may be easier, maybe quicker, but you know, spending that hour or 3 hours in the van, depending on whether you get lost, is going to create a great crucible for having discussions about the wider landscape. So the message there is make sure you just talk to everyone as much as you can.
Sure. Well, that's excellent. Amir, any last points from your perspective?
No, I'll just echo Carl's feedback in terms of just make sure you set a goal and then use your time to network as much as possible. I think those are great suggestions.
Perfect. We're going to jump now to the most prominent program, but before we do that, I wanted to again thank you, Serban, somebody who's an MD plus a technologist and so connected. I'm sure you've got lots of demands on your time, and as well for Carl and Amir to step in. Ramneet was going to introduce a little bit about the most prominent program that is run through the Trade Commission services, and that's called Can Export. And Can Export is, like I said, it's the most sought after, so we sort of thought we'd leave it to last. And I know Darian has used it specifically. Actually, one last note, we do have a session tomorrow about healthcare that VentureLabs is sponsoring, 11:30 to 12:30, which you can find on the Vancouver Startup Week app. Yeah, so Ramneet, tell us a little bit about Can Export, and then we'll jump in with Darian and his experience.
Okay, I'll keep it short. I have a couple slides in the wrap up as well, but Can Export is a funding program that helps SMEs de-risk their entry into new markets. There are two pillars of the program that are eligible, that SMEs are eligible for. One of them is called Can Export SME, and the other one is called Can Export Innovation. So each of those programs can provide a company up to 75% of their eligible expenses related to entry into a new market, and that's a maximum of $75,000. The main difference between the two programs is that Can Export SME is focused on helping an export-ready company prepare to enter a new international market and to pursue exporting. So there are some requirements for that program. Companies need to have at least $100,000 in revenue to apply, and typically they have to be in operation for at least 2 years. The innovation program, however, is open to all companies. It doesn't have a revenue requirement, and they don't have to have a minimum length of existence. The objective of that program is really to formalize R&D partnerships, and I can get into the stages of technology development and whatnot in a little bit, but I'd love to hear from Darian on his experience with the program.
Yeah. So now getting the chance to finally introduce Darian, even though we tapped you at the very beginning as well. Darian is the Indigenous founder of the Vancouver-based SEO company Jelly Digital Marketing and PR, and also runs a digital marketing course called Jelly Academy. He's also the host of a TV show called Marketing News Canada, which is on Amazon Prime in the US and UK, and also hosts a podcast channel, which I can tell because of how you have your setup professionally done. So Darian, why Jelly Marketing, first off, as a name? And what motivated you to start a company that sort of does that marketing? That's yeah. So just take it away.
Sure. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I was building an app. So we built one of the first apps in the iOS store. It was awesome, really fun. But then if you've ever met an app builder, and maybe some of you are listening right now, they love it, they're excited, but it's the whole thing of, if you've ever seen Kevin Costner's Field of Dreams, it's often, if we build it, they will come. And so they launched this app in the store, and I'm so excited for them. And then like their mom downloads it, and their friend from elementary school, and that's it. And so I built this package that was 1/3 PR, so traditional public relations, 1/3 digital ads. So at the time it was just Google ads, and 1/3 social media. So we launched it for them. And that way we saw a massive kind of increase in app downloads. And then as the app market became easier, there was templates, and it was, kind of iOS and Android made it really easy for anyone to build an app. I kind of pivoted, and we launched Jelly, because I was out for brunch with my mom at the Fairmont waterfront, and there's these little jars of jelly that were so cute, and I thought that would make an amazing business card. And so I have one over there. I don't want to. I could grab it, but then my headphones would be like, ah. But it's these little jars of jelly we got, and on it we branded them Jelly Digital Marketing PR, and then we give them out at events when there was events, and you could actually there's a secret website, so don't tell anyone. You can order peanut butter and bread from the website, and we ship people peanut butter and bread to go with their jelly. So yeah, we've been going for 8 years, 20 staff, based in Fort Langley, BC, the beautiful birthplace of British Columbia, working with brands like Vistaprint, to Lego, to Warner Brothers, and 7-Eleven.
Perfect. I'm going to try to find some of that jelly. I've got a little bit of fanatical desire to eat jam all the time. So at what point do you decide to go from Fort Langley into sort of going international? When I saw you're based there, I was like, that's got to be an interesting story. I mean, what made you sort of go that direction, and how does export, or can export, fit into that, that vision?
Yeah, so we were originally in Gastown, watering Canby there. It was beautiful. And then we moved out to Abbotsford, where there was a co-working space when we got started. And my wife had gone to Trinity Western University, fell in love with the town of Fort Langley. We started having children, procreating these miniature humans. And so we decided to settle down in Fort Langley and get a home here. So, and thus I thought I would like to walk to my office, and that's why we settled here. So, and I knew about the export grant because we had clients that had products that they wanted to export. And so I always assumed that the export grant was only for Canadian products. And then someone had mentioned to me, I can't remember even who it was. I think it was someone from granted.ca, this amazing organization that kind of walks you through how to get grants. If you haven't signed up yet for their e-newsletter, please do. Life-changing. Every week they send you new grants that are available. It's incredible. And their pound of flesh they take for doing the grant for you is often worth the work that they do to make it happen. So they mentioned they're like, they do services as well. And I was like, they don't do services. And they said, yeah, they do services. And I was like, no, they don't. And so I was introduced to this guy named Francis. I don't know if Francis is here or not, but he was amazing. And he said, Darian, this is how you do it. So we drafted something up with the support of Granted. Francis gave us feedback. We then submitted it, and crazily quick. And I don't even know if I'm allowed to say how quick it took, but we got an alert that said you were accepted, not for the full amount we applied for, but we were accepted. So we then had to spend our money. So it wasn't free money. We had to spend money, and then we would submit the receipts, and then 75% of that receipt would be reimbursed. But it gave us that like boost, that confidence, that push to go from thinking, all right, let's be a Vancouver-based service company, maybe some work in Toronto. It happens once in a while. It's so exciting. To, man, what could it look like to work in the United States of America? And then all of a sudden Francis was like, hey, Darian, we don't just give you this reimbursement. I'm going to introduce you to some people. And all of a sudden I was like, what? And then he introduced us to someone in like Seattle, and then Florida even. There's this whole state called Florida, which has all sorts of people there, amazing people. And then Boston, and they're the nicest humans in the world. Like I was just talking to someone recently in Chicago. So there's a Chicago person, and she was like, okay, this is what I can do for you. Here's who you need to meet. Here's what you can do. Here's what I can do for you. And I was like, part of me was like, why are you doing this? But then I realized that's their job. So.
That's great. So what lessons would you have, or what's the sort of piece of advice about working with Can Export? I've never explored it at all myself. So
Ooh, it's lovely.
Like what's sort of the best practice? Is it just set up a
Yeah.
business plan, get it accepted, and then execute, or?
Yeah, the main thing is like it's about results. So I think the only reason I think like we're actually working on our second application because it's been now a year, but I think and again, it forces you to measure results in sales. So I think we had to say, hey, we're going to get like 12 new retainers working with law firms, possibly managed service providers, doing lead generation like SEO and digital ads for these American law firms. And then what it did was it pushed us up against a goal to say, okay, we got to get 12 leads. We're going to spend X dollars. We learned three things. One was digital ads are not very successful. So, running Facebook ads for B2B work and Google ads and LinkedIn ads just did not bring us those, the closures that we were hoping for or the leads. But the second thing we learned was providing webinars. And so what we were able to do is, because there's no more trade shows, you can do a line item in your application called trade shows. We're able to sponsor webinars for associations. So we did Association of Law Firm Administrators, Association of Law Firm Marketers, and those were incredible. So we would do kind of in a sense, train people, give away what we're able to do and teach them some amazing things. And then remarketing ads were really great. So the follow me ads that follow people around. And then we're able to follow up because in America, they have a lot more liberty when it comes to giving away email addresses. We have a castle law in Canada that prevents us from doing this. But for some reason, they're like, here's the emails of everyone that came to your webinar. And I was like, whoa, this is so illegal in Canada. But in America, you can do it. So we would follow up. And those, we were able to see clients and we got paid money from these clients. We have a thing where we charge in Canadian, so it would have been awesome if we made that like nice 21% bonus every time we got paid, but we just charge in Canadian, which for them, they were like, well, that's great. That's like a 20-30% discount. And it's been so cool. Like one of the neatest experiences ever. And we now have a really good portfolio of American clients. And I think it's also the chicken and egg too. The third thing we learned was no one really wants to work with you unless you have an American client. And so we really didn't see the momentum or the snowball effect happen until we got our first American client. And then the snowball started going. And then we also learned like the long-term effects that we're able to do. We're still seeing the ripple effects of doing those webinars, writing articles, and then just the sales follow-up. We worked with a company out of Toronto called the Sales Factory, who was able to do kind of the sales phone call follow-ups, which we don't normally do in-house and have never done before, which again, it allowed us to try something we've never done before, thanks to the Can Export grant. And they phoned a bunch of people, and that also was a very helpful thing as well.
Oh, excellent. Going back to that whole relationship thing that Eric opened the session with, is sort of what you're alluding to there. Thanks for running through all that. One thing we wanted to certainly do now is go back to Ramneet. And we've talked about a lot of different government programs. So Darian was talking about different elements, Eric was talking about different elements. And so Ramneet was going to run through these quickly and tell us just different names and where to find more information. And I know that there's also, she'll quickly speak to Innovation Canada, which we didn't have time to bring in today, but that's another excellent government program. Ramneet?
Unmute myself. Can you guys see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to run through this deck very quickly. And it has a bit more information in here, as well as some websites. Bear with me. Here we go. Okay. So we've spoken about our network, some of the programs like Can Export, the CTAs, and really as Shurban and Rob, well, Rob unfortunately wasn't able to have the tech difficulties, but with Shurban and the company speaking, you really can see that there is a wealth of expertise with all of the trade commissioners that we have around the world. These are our key services, what we can do, and Eric touched upon this in the beginning. Really, we are here to provide you with market intelligence and to make connections for you when you are ready to enter new markets. I would just echo one piece of advice that Eric had given, which is be targeted in the regions that you are approaching. Really know which markets you want to be active in and ensure that you have the time and the resources to put the effort, the full effort into that market. I had spoken about what constitutes a trade commissioner service client. Again, having meaningful economic ties to Canada, contributing to Canada's economic growth, capacity for internationalization. That's really the crux of it. I would just mention that we don't have any specific targets that we're looking for, but if you can show that you're a growth stage company that meets this definition, you are eligible for our services. And I wanted to highlight some resources that are available to everybody. On the website at the bottom there, tradecommissioner.gc.ca, you can access our export guides. We have added a lot of content this year over on e-commerce, talking about different e-commerce platforms that are widely used in different countries. If you're wondering whether you are ready to export, there's a great export quiz that you can take. So I highly recommend that you that everybody visit the website. Oops. And sorry, I should mention one other point on this, and that is there is a MyTCS account that you can sign up for, and that will provide you with access to a lot of different market research studies, all for free. This is another tool that we didn't talk very much about, free trade agreements, but just for everyone's information, Canada has 14 free trade agreements. That gives you access, preferential access to 1.5 billion customers around the world. There is a really interesting tool that was launched earlier this year by a number of government departments, including the Trade Commissioner Service, called Tariff Finder. You can go into that website, enter the code for your product or service, and find out what tariff rate you would be eligible for different countries. On the Can Export program, our website is actually very comprehensive with information on the different programs, what constitutes the funding categories that you can be eligible for. So I mentioned on the SME program earlier that this is targeted to companies that are looking to export. And Darian, in his example, spoke about some of the different expenses that he was able to apply for. And so you'll see in there, search engine optimization is one of the categories. Typically, this program was used for companies to attend virtual trade shows, to travel to new markets. Because of COVID, that's obviously on hold, but you can be creative and look at an idea such as the webinar idea that Darian spoke about. If you need to translate your marketing materials into a different language, if you need to register your IP for entry into a new country, all of those expenses are eligible. And you'll see here on the right side that these are the requirements for the companies applying. Again, I have mentioned $100,000 in revenue is the minimum for this program. The second program that I spoke about was Can Export Innovation. So this is available to all countries, or to all companies, pardon me, and you just need to have a prototype level technology that you're applying with. It's project-based, but again, this is the goal and objective is to co-develop, validate, or adapt your technology in a new market. So you're looking for an R&D partnership to help advance your tech with another partner. Again, your certification costs, IP protection costs can be eligible for reimbursement as well for this program. We have other funding programs that I won't get into in too much detail here, but I've listed one, for example, that is for R&D collaboration with a few select countries. And Sherban hit upon the Canadian Technology Accelerator program. As he mentioned, there are a number of programs active around the world. We have 3 programs in the US, in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. 1 program in Mexico City, 5 programs in Asia, in Taipei, Japan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And Delhi is opening up this year. And then 2 programs in Europe, in Berlin and in London. The thing to note is that every CTA program is run a little differently. There are certain programs that are more sector agnostic, like Boston, which Servan spoke about. There are others that are very specific to an industry. So we have a digital health program right now that's running, an ag tech program, smart cities. So you can, again, go onto our website and look at the CTA tab and have a look at the different programs that are available. And lastly, these are our email addresses for all of our regional offices in Canada. Of course, we're at the very bottom there for British Columbia and the Yukon. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to connect with you to tell you more about what we can do to help. We also can connect you to other partners in the ecosystem, and a number of federal, provincial, and other associations. And on that, I wanted to share Innovation Canada information. So Innovation Canada they provide advisory services for companies. They can help guide you to the right resources. They can give you general advice to help you with your growth. They can make referrals to all partners at various levels of government. It's a no-cost service. And Amy Gopal's on the call with us today. Her email address is below. So if you're just curious as to whether what you're eligible for, and you just want to get some advisory services, I would recommend reaching out to Amy. So there's our email address again. There's our website. Highly recommend that you go on and create a MyTCS account and learn more about what we can do to help you.